welcome to the Art of Being Human. You know, when we deal with children, and this whole segment has been to help children go through their life crises so that when they get past it, they can be normal adults and they can have a good life as adults. And you know, there is a statement, the child is father to the man. And what it means is what happens to you in childhood determines what kind of a person you're going to be like as an adult. Now, I saw something that was disturbing the other day on television, and it was a little girl. She was about 5 years old, and her parents took her to what was going to be a demonstration. And the reason is they thought that this is going to be a kind of important for her to know about. This is what's going to be important. This is kind of a watershed moment in society where we finally get a difference in the way that people treat each other. And I want her to see this and be a part of it. A little bit like taking a young child, to a presidential election or an inauguration. It's a moment in history and maybe they should be a part of it. But what does a 5-year-old want in a riot situation anyway? And what she did, and I thought this was kind of heartbreaking, but at the same time she was so innocent. She walked up to a police officer, 5 years old, and he's got his uniform and he's got his gun and he's got all of the things he has to wear. And she says, "Are you going to shoot me?" Now, what child, 5 years old, should even be thinking about that? Why should the parents have gotten her so acclimated to the fact that there are race riots that go on, or riots that go on, that as a 5-year-old, she needs to be a part of that? And she just innocently walked up to the policeman and said, "Are you going to shoot me?" But I have to commend the policeman. He was on top of it. He was great. He scooched down to her and says, "Oh no, I would never do a thing like that." He says, "I'm here to protect you. You can run and dance and somersault and do all kinds of things that little girls your age do, and I'm here to protect you." So the idea is, when you're raising children, are you raising them to be fearful? I would not take a 5-year-old to a riot or a demonstration. If I could be absolutely sure that nothing bad was going to happen, that it wasn't going to turn ugly, and I thought the child was mature enough to actually get something out of it, and talk with the child afterwards, how did you feel? What was good about it? Were you ever afraid? And be with them at all times and never leave them alone, never leave them by themselves. Then there might be a reason to take a child, but generally speaking, I would say no to that. Children are not little adults. They can't understand or feel or act in any way that's like little adults. They're an entity on their own. They don't understand adult things, nor should they. The brain does not become developed until age 25. Why should a young child be exposed to things that they have to have some kind of an adult type brain functioning in order to understand it? So you take a little girl and she's afraid of being shot. She's only 5. And she shouldn't have been there. As far as I'm concerned, she shouldn't have been there. But I can see the parents' point of view that this is a watershed moment, and it's a part of history, and so in a way it's good to have her a part of history. But what is she going to remember? She's not going to remember anything. She may remember that the policeman said she'd be safe and he'd protect her. That would be a good thing to remember. But as far as the politics of the moment is concerned, she's not going to remember that. Nor should she. As you grow older, as the child grows, they have certain phases of development, and in those phases of development that they go through, they have a typical kind of challenge that they have to overcome, and it's different for each age. And as long as they go through those stages of development and into adulthood, then they can live a perfectly good life, unless there are other circumstances. There are always circumstances that intervene, but barring circumstances that intervene, the person can have a healthy life. But if you try to get a child to become involved in an adult issue when they're too young to understand it, you're not helping them to grow. You're not helping them to be stabilized. They don't understand it. It makes no sense to them. And so you get children wondering, are they going to be shot? Are they going to be killed? Am I going to live? Am I going to die? They don't hardly even know what those words mean when they're young. It's just not natural for them. So you have to be careful. And what happens as they grow up and they get involved in things, or parents have them get involved with things for whatever reason, I'm not saying it's all bad, then what happens? They feel guilt and they feel shame and things happen to them. And so we're taking a look at the guilt that we started on the last segment. And the reason I want to do this is that as a child grows up and gets past the childhood years, they need to be able to take their place as normal human beings with a healthy self-concept, without blaming other people for everything, without accepting blame for everything, and just to live a normal, healthy life. And it's possible, but you have to realize and you have to deal with the guilt. So I'm just going to go over this once again. There is parental guilt on children, where the parents are blaming the children for things which they have no responsibility for. If the parents are getting divorced, don't blame your child. Don't tell your child they're in the way. Don't tell the child that you're only sticking with the parent because for their sakes, because then they accept the guilt of that, and they shouldn't have to accept the guilt over anything. Their responsibility is to learn and to grow and to develop as a normal human being. But to accept adult responsibility for things, it only puts a negative slant on things, and they can grow up and they can have that guilt. I caused my parents' divorce. They didn't want me, etc., etc., etc. I mean, you can go on with this forever, but you don't want that to happen to a child. You want them to grow and become a blessing to other people, accept people's help, give help to other people, and be a good person. And they're not going to do that if they're overloaded with guilt because the parents blamed them for something. So to tell a child that they were a mistake, that's really an awful thing to do to a child. They should always be wanted. They should always be loved. If there are problems, you handle the problems. But you don't devalue the worth of a human being. You see, this is what, I could get into this whole abortion thing. I hate abortion. God hates abortion. It should never be. But the problem is the child is inconvenient. So get rid of the child. You're killing a normal human baby, either preterm, full term, or just after birth, post-term baby. And you're taking an innocent person who has nothing to say about anything except that they were born, and that's not even their own fault. That's not even their own doing, and blaming it and saying, it's in my way, get rid of it. In what society do we decide to kill innocent people? Now, I know innocent people die, but in what society is that something that's considered to be normal? It's not considered to be normal and should never be. Now, there's also, so you have the parental guilt that's heaped on children. Then you have the spouse-related guilt. That is when one parent blames the other parent, and it's probably going back and forth. The spouse-related guilt. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done that. And they just heap guilt upon each other. Now, there is a saying, and it's true, that in a good marriage, the two become one. That's actually biblical. And the people are free to grow and develop as human beings. If you have a good marriage, the wife may want to start doing things or studying things or learning or growing or going back to school, whatever, and the husband should support that. Or the husband may decide they want to do some extra things, or they want to study or whatever it is they want to do, and the wife should support that. If you have the wife supporting the husband and the husband supporting the wife, and as the Bible says, they really, two of them become one flesh, then you can have a very healthy, very creative marriage that's based upon growth, the support that they feel as they grow themselves and as they support each other in their growth. That's very important. And they raise healthy children because the children can see that this is healthy, this is good. Mom's doing some extra things, Dad's doing some extra things, and on it goes, and it's a very healthy thing. But if you actually have something that stops that relationship because there's guilt or something happens to stop that relationship from being healthy, then the creativity stops with it. People have creativity. The creativity will manifest itself in good things as long as the support is there and there's nothing to choke it. But as soon as something happens, there's a divorce, maybe the husband met somebody else or whatever it is, as soon as you have something that is interfering with the marriage, so the marriage can't go on as the way it should, then the creativity stops. You can create until something chokes it off. What's going to choke it off? Something that happens. It could almost be anything. It might not even be something that was a person's fault. Maybe somebody gets sick. Maybe somebody lost a job. But the creativity, if they can't unite and go together and grow together, then the creativity stops. That's the end of the creativity. And then what they try to do is use their energy to maintain some kind of a relationship, but there's no progress made. There are no new developments made. So you see, you can choke off with guilt or with other things that happen. You can choke off a marriage relationship so it is not what it should be. Then, of course, you can have children-inspired guilt. That is, children are good at showing guilt to their parents. You know, like, for example, a child who knows that their parent has been involved in something that's not good, and they shower them with guilt so they can get away with doing things themselves. That has to be stopped. Now, in the last segment, I talked to you about this woman who had children, and that she had been a bad parent, and she decided to put a stop to it, and that they were not going to control her by making her feel guilty. You'd be surprised. People want control, and they want control and they want power. And one of the ways they do it is to make other people feel guilty, because there's nothing worse than carrying around depression and a sense of guilt. And what's going to happen is the person is going to want to give up the guilt. They want to do something to stop the guilt, because they can't feel good, they can't create, they can't grow, and so therefore they will do whatever another person demands of them in order to stop the guilt so that they can feel better. So people learn to manipulate and to control each other. Now, the purpose of the control for most people, and I'm not putting this so much in a negative sense right now, but the purpose of control is for you to have life the way you want to have it. If you can control something and you can control what happens, then you can have an outcome that is pleasing to yourself, that is good for yourself. So if I can control something, or if I can control a child, or if I can control a relative, or if I can control my husband, I'm not married, but if I was, if I can control what he does, where he goes, where the kids go, then I can have a life because I can predict what the outcome's going to be because I'm the one that's behind it. But the problem is you can't control anything. How much in life can you control? You can't control the weather. You can't control the virus that's going around. You can't control much of anything. So what you do is you try to manipulate and get as much control as you can over things that you think are controllable. No, I won't let him take the new job. No, I won't move. No, I won't do this, or I won't do that, or I won't let the kids do this, or I won't let them do that. Why? Because if I can control them, then maybe I can feel comfortable with my life, because I can maybe control an outcome. that's going to be satisfactory to me. So what you have to learn in life is that nobody owns anybody else. Now, you do have to exert authority over your children as they're growing up, because they have to rely upon you. They can't control themselves. You know, they can't take care of themselves, so they have to be bonded to you to be able to survive. But when it comes to adult relationships, nobody owns anybody else. Everybody has the right to make their own decisions about things, as long as they're not deliberately hurting themselves or somebody else or a family member or something like that. But if you let go of that control and you just give up that control, and just go with the flow and see what happens, and not be so demanding of it must be my way or else. You know, I've seen a lot of people in marriage situations, and I've seen a lot of people nag each other. You can't do this, you can't do that, why do that? And there's no creativity, there's no flow to the marriage, because everyone's trying to manipulate everybody else. And if they try to manipulate everybody else, then they think they're in control, but they're not happy being in control, because something is going to slip out of their control, because we really have very little control over anything. So let it be. You know, God's in control of everything anyway, so just let it be and then follow along. And if you can help and support, then do it. If you can't, well, try not to get in the way of somebody else who really needs to grow and develop. If your child would rather be, say, a videographer than a physician, don't try to force them to be something that they're not. Every person has their own unique identity, and you can't force people to be what they're not, but you can support them to be the best that they possibly can be, as long as it's their choice to let you do it without you controlling. So what purpose can guilt have in our lives? Well, not a whole lot, except that we need to learn to forgive ourselves for what we have done wrong, and we need to learn to forgive others for what they have done wrong, and then accept each other. You know, you don't have to be bosom buddies, but accept each other. You know, you're not perfect, you're not going to be perfect. And the person who has hurt you isn't perfect, and maybe didn't intend to hurt you to begin with. And for that, you see, you have to just kind of mellow out and not be overly demanding, and not let guilt ruin your lives, or not let guilt ruin the lives of others, of other people. So you have to be willing to be forgiving, and you have to be willing to just search out new ways to be creative, and to go with that, you know. You have to eliminate guilt. You have to eliminate feeling that you're not good enough because somebody is making you feel not good enough. And so if somebody is dumping guilt on you, you have to be able to cut free from that. Now, it's awfully easy to manipulate a child, because it's awful easy to groom them. It's awful easy for them to accept guilt, because they're like little sponges. The parents get a divorce, it must be my fault. Had to be my fault that my parents got divorced. I don't know what I did wrong, but I must have done something wrong. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. Children accept guilt very easily, and you have to shield them from that, because it's just one of the characteristics they have. For one thing, their brains aren't developed enough to really be able to sit down and think things through and look at all angles of things. Their brains can't do it. They're just too young. So it's easy to manipulate them and make them feel guilty, which is the worst thing you can do with a child. It's, yes, you made a mistake, but that's okay. We all make mistakes. But you see, you can't demean somebody. You can't say, you made a mistake, it's your fault, you're not worth very much. That's what happens with people. That's what happens when they're depressed. That's what happens when children get guilt thrown on them. It's a case of, you weren't good enough and it's your fault, and somehow it devalues them. What we have to do in human relationships is to make sure that we don't devalue a human being. Don't devalue a child. They're not going to be perfect. I remember going to the movies, And I was standing behind a friend of mine that I hadn't seen for a while. And she had a daughter with her. Her daughter was about 6 years old, and they were going to see a child-friendly film. And we were talking, and I said, well, your daughter's very beautiful. She's very good. Well, she's not perfect yet, but we're working on it. And I said to her, I certainly hope she's not perfect, because you're not perfect, and neither am I. We're not going to reach a state of perfection. No matter what we do, we are frail human beings. And if she makes a mistake, don't let her think that she's disrupted your whole life. She's a human being. She's a child. You know, the difficulty that very bright children have is the fact that when they do something wrong, when they fail a test or whatever it was they did, they feel terrible guilt because they feel they let everybody down. They've been held up as the perfect student, the perfect child, well-behaved, growing, learning, you know, just a wonderful child. And suddenly they do something and the whole thing collapses. And they don't have the maturity to say, this is a mistake, I'm sorry I did that. They have only the maturity to say, I have crashed, I've done something awful, my parents are disappointed, my teachers are disappointed, I'm disappointed, and they actually can go into a suicidal depression. Maybe I'm not worth very much. It goes from, I made a mistake, to I am a mistake. And you just can't let that happen. So I talked with this woman, and we just, you know, just chatted a while, and I said, you know, children are going to make mistakes as they grow, and that's going to be normal. We do the same thing. We make mistakes. Do you think your growth process is ended because now you're an adult? Do you think it's ending now? Well, no, it's not ending now, you know, because you're going to be growing, not maybe physically or emotionally, but you're growing in terms of the things that you learn for the rest of your life. And you're going to make mistakes off and on for the rest of your life. You won't do so on purpose, but it'll happen. So we need to be forgiving of each other. So to a child who didn't make the team and felt bad because they let somebody else down, I would talk with them and say, it's okay. You're a human being. That's what you're supposed to be. And if it happens, it happens. You can always recoup something. Very rarely can you not make things better. And even if it turns out that your life may change because of a mistake, that doesn't mean your life is over, and it doesn't mean that you can't have a good life. You need to learn to be patient with yourself as you grow, also with your children. So we're running out of time again, so I'm going to close it here. We'll be doing something else next time. Please join me then.